we go. We're continuing Unit 33 for the Menucha of Sir Moshe Fiori and Sir Naim Dangur and the refuah of all of Am Yisrael and the rest of the world. Shad Hashem. I'm gonna divide this up into two segments: the Rambam's opinion and other Rishonim about the question of preparing on Shabbos for the weekdays. And I think that's not exact. I think the definition isn't exactly the classic. In Hebrew, it's called Hachana Mikodesh L'chol. I don't know. Is there a standard term in English for Hachana Mikodesh L'chol? Okay, first of all, good, because I was thinking maybe I totally missed this, but is there, so Hachana Mikodesh L'chol literally means preparing for the week, right, for Chol on Shabbat. And I think that definition is somewhat lacking, so maybe you have an advantage because you're not skewed by any kind of English term. The Hebrew term of Hachana Mikodesh L'chol I think is inexact, and I'm going to explain why as we learn the Gemara, the Braitot, the Rishonim. I want to start Davka from something we saw last time. The Gemara here said, that the Gemara in Eruvin Daf Lamed says that a person is not allowed to walk to the edge of his field on Shabbat. To the end, you live in the city the way generally cities were built. Towns, you lived in town. And you worked at the outskirts of the town, right? If you worked in the fields, if you needed your space for your agricultural whatever you did, which most of the work was agricultural, right? So you're allowed to go to the edge of the city, to the edge of the town, if you have another reason, and not if you don't have another reason. In other words, I want to go to the other end of my city because I need to be there after Shabbat. Is that allowed? So the general rule was, there are two rules. Rule number one, if it's for something motor, let's have to give a shiur on the other side of town after Shabbat. Am I allowed to walk to the other side of town? The answer is yes. I'm allowed to walk to the other side of town on Shabbat if I need to give a shiur there right after Shabbat. Why? Because I'm allowed to give a shiur on Shabbat, so I'm allowed to walk in order to give a shiur on Motzei Shabbat. Right, I'm allowed to walk on Shabbat in order to give a shiur on Motzei Shabbat. But if I need to go work, if I need to go write, if I need to go have a meeting, have a business meeting, then I'm not allowed to walk on Shabbat in order to get to the business meeting on time after Shabbat. Unless that's the first rule. There's an addendum to that at the end of the Gemara here that says only if we can see that that's the reason. In other words, if I can go to the other side of the town to visit a friend, to meet a friend, and then I'll have a Ma'ariv, and then I'll be there to be at a business meeting, that's okay. Right? It even says here, maybe if I'm just preparing my shiur, so I can just be walking around and talking Torah to myself, so people assume, oh, you just talk, it's just that funny rabbi who talks Torah to himself. He's just, not quite, he isn't concentrating. That's why he ends up on the other side of town. But he isn't going in order to be there after Shabbat. So we see from here that the whole notion of doing something on Shabbat that will help make my Motzei Shabbat easier is allowed as long as one of those two is fulfilled. Right? In other words, I could spend my time on Shabbat walking to the other side of the town if it doesn't look like I'm going there for work. In order to do a melacha, in order to do something, right? The rule there was anything I'm not allowed to talk about, I'm not allowed to walk for, unless people can't tell. Right? If people can't know, if it isn't evident that I'm going for work, then it's okay. Let's just quickly see that in the Tosfot. This is going to be very significant later on when you go into Hachana Mikodesh L'chol. And I know we saw this last time. I think it's important to repeat because it'll affect the whole discussion of Hachana Mikodesh L'chol. Says Tosfot, he says over here, I'll follow like this. Omer Rabbi, Hatam min kira milta, right? It's evident It's evident that the reason you're going to the edge of the town is to get to the pool right after Shabbat. So everyone understands why you're going. This is based on the Gemara. It's not, Tosfot says, I'm not making anything up. The Gemara itself was definitely alluding to this when it said the previous Gemara I showed before. Is definitely alluding to this idea that if I'm going to the edge of the city and it's not evident that I'm doing that for work, or, and when I say work, I mean any asur melacha, anything that's asur on Shabbos, it's okay, as long as it's not evident. That was Tosfot's idea. Now, let's have a look at a bunch of Braitot, Mishnayot and Braitot that give us some trouble. They give this notion some trouble. So the Mishnah, Perek Tetvav says, Mekaplim et hakelim, afilu 4 ו5 פעמים, ומציעים את המיטות מלילי שבת לשבת, אבל לא משבת למוצאי שבת. I'm focusing, of course, on the end. Right? Are you allowed to make the bed? Now, in their time, just important to point out, when they say make the bed, they mean make the bed. They don't mean, right? They don't mean straighten out, flatten out the duvet. What they mean when they say make the bed, they mean the couch and the bed were the same, right? The couch and people didn't have quite as much furniture as we have. And to mitzia the mitah meant prepare it for sleeping. In other words, you'd wake up and put the pillows and whatever in a certain way to allow you to sit on the bed as a couch. That was your living room, right? And then evening would come, you'd change the setting. Maybe you'd put it in a different position, different angle, right? Whatever it is to prepare it for sleeping. So are you allowed to make the bed? And when I say make the bed, I mean not flatten the duvets. It's to prepare the bed for sleeping from a couch to a bed on Shabbat. And the answer is, Shabbat morning, you might say, well, I'm going to shul now, but I'm going to want to have a nap later, so I want to prepare the bed now. So that's milele Shabbat le Shabbat, as long as you intend on sleeping on it on Shabbat, but not mishabbat le motzei Shabbat. Not on Shabbat for Motzei Shabbat. Now let's see the Rambam on this about the first part. The Rambam and Rashi, they understand the Rambam. Let's read the Rambam. Ein מקפלים הבגדים בשבת כדרך שעושים בחול בבגדים כשיחבשו אותן. ואם לא היה לו כלי אחר להחליפו, מותר לקפלו לפשטו ולהתכסות בו, כדי שיתנאה בו בשבת. So the Rambam here in Perek of Bet is not a din of Oneg, not a din of Kavod. The Perek of Bet is the Drabanans, the whole chapter there, Perek of Bet, discusses Drabanans, different melachot. From the context, it's evident that the Rambam, his issue is that this is very much like kibus. This is very much like washing clothing. You're not to wash clothing on Shabbat. It's a melacha d'oraisa, in fact, washing clothing on Shabbat. And the Rambam says, you're allowed to fold the clothing and to flatten them out and whatever it takes for Shabbat itself, but you're not allowed for Motzei Shabbat. And it's evident that the context in the Rambam is kibus drabanan. So you're allowed to fold the clothing, says the Mishnah, as long as it's for Shabbat, but not for Motzei Shabbat. As long as you're folding it for Shabbat. But the context of the Rambam here isn't you're folding it for Motzei Shabbat because you want to clean your room. That's not the problem. The problem is that you fold it in a certain way that's very much like dry cleaning. I'm going to show this. I'm going to prove this more. So this one is a bit harder to understand. I think the next example is much clearer. Tanu Banan. קערות שאכל בהן ערבית, מדיחן לאכול בהן שחרית. שחרית, מדיחן לאכול בהן בצהריים. בצהריים, מדיחן לאכול בהן במנחה. So, you finish your Shabbos meal, you finish your Friday night meal, Seudah, you're allowed to wash the dishes. Why? Because you lose them in the morning. In the morning, you can wash the dishes again for the afternoon. In the afternoon, you can wash them to have Seudah Shlishit, right? B'mincha, right after Mincha Ktana, right? Seudah Shlishit. Mina mincha ve'ilach, the last couple of hours of Shabbat, eno mediach, you're not allowed to wash anymore. אבל כוסות וקיתוניות וצלחויות, מדיח והולך כל היום כולו, לפי שאין כבל לשתייה. Cups, the kids use endlessly, right? Cups are just used all the time. You can always wash cups because you can always say it's for Shabbat. So this Braita seems to say that you're not allowed to wash dishes on Shabbat for Motzei Shabbat. Right? You're only allowed to wash dishes on Shabbat for Shabbat itself, but not for Motzei Shabbat. Why not? So here the Rambam in the next chapter, once again, which discusses melachot drabanan, not mimtzoch tzachar de'badavar, melachot drabanan, writes the following: Asur la'adiach ka'arot v'ilpasin v'chayotze behen, mipnei shehu kemetaken, אלא אם כן ידיחן לאכול בהם סעודה אחרת באותה שבת. אבל כלי שתייה כגון כוסות וקיתונות מותר להדיחן בחולת, שאין כבל לשתייה, it's always for שבת, ואין מציעים את המיטות בשבת כדי לישן עליהן למוצאי שבת, אבל מציעים מלילי שבת לשבת. Now, why are you not allowed to make the bed on Shabbat? In the context, it seems that the issue is what the Rambam wrote here, מפני שהוא כמתקן. So it says Markevet HaMishneh, from the context also, for Perkaf Gimel, the context there is boneh, it's makebe patish. Makebe patish, the final preparation of a kli, right? So it's evident from the Rambam that the issue here isn't preparing for Motzei Shabbat. The issue is fixing the kli. So I have a cup. My cup is somewhat broken. Why is it broken? Because none of you can use it, because it has my germs on it, right? So it's broken. How can I fix this cup? By washing it. If I wash my dishes, then I'll have fixed them. It's a form of fixing. It's a kind of makeh patish drabanan. Now, the Rambam says, if you're preparing it for Shabbat itself, it doesn't seem quite as much. This is Markevet HaMishneh explains in the Rambam. If you prepare it for Shabbat itself, you can't say it's makeh patish because the way that I'd say the test, the point at which we test is makeh patish or not, occurs when Shabbat ends, right? So I have a broken dish. It's broken in the sense that my germs are on it, or they're dirty, whatever, right? My bed is problematic. I can't use it for sleeping. So if I want to sleep on Shabbat, that's fine. But if I'm fixing it on Shabbat, how can I tell that I fixed it on Shabbat and didn't just prepare it for use on Shabbat? If I'm using it on Shabbat itself, it's okay. But if I prepare it for Motzei Shabbat, so I've fixed it on Shabbat. Now, it's important to point out, this only works with dishes. This doesn't work with anything else, right? Here's a question. Am I allowed to carry something on Shabbat in order to use after Shabbat? According to the Rambam, so far, there's no real issue with that, right? Because the Rambam didn't mention anywhere the issue of preparing for Motzei Shabbat. The Rambam only discusses me'ein kibus, me'ein tikkun, everything is forms of an av melacha. So if you're fixing something on Shabbat, and when I say fixing, I mean in a very minimal sense, right? I have my dish that isn't quite as useful. I have my couch that is not quite as useful. If I fix them in that sense on Shabbat, that would be a tikkun drabanan, right? But there's no notion of what I mentioned before, hachana mikodesh l'chol, according to the Rambam here. So that, in the Rambam's opinion, there's a lot less space. The only thing I do have, so according to the Rambam, I just want to sum up, according to the Rambam does accept this Gemara, because it's a Gemara, right? The Rambam does accept the idea of l'achshich al tchum. That's why I went back to here to complete the Rambam's shita. So according to the Rambam, there are two issues. Number one is doing something that's a tircha, that's evident that I'm doing it for Motzei Shabbat, right? Walking to the edge of my field that I'm doing for work.
Nikita wasn't feeling so great.
Why?
Let's swallow it.
So one issue is hachshacha l'tchum, right? You go to the edge of your field, and over there you go to the edge of your field, and in order to work. So there it's evident that you want to prepare the work, and that's the issue. The issue is not making Motzei Shabbat easier, right? The idea of hachana mikodesh l'chol in the sense of making Motzei Shabbat easier, or spending the Shabbat time in order, spending your Shabbat time on something that you should be spending Motzei Shabbat on, there's no such notion in the Rambam. There's only the idea of walking in order to work, right? Walking to work in a way that's evident that it's work. You're allowed to walk to work as long as it's not evident, I point out, right? And fixing kelim. Fixing kelim could be folding the laundry in a certain way that we're going to discuss later on, and washing dishes in the sense that you're fixing the dish, right? You're preparing the couch, you fix the couch, etc. So that seems to be the Rambam's opinion about this. It's going to help us later on, but